muslin finer than the morning mist. Jamdanis woven like poetry. Silks that gleamed like liquid gold. And katha, where every stitch carried memories. These textiles adorned emperors, queens, and courts across continents. By the 1700s, the land contributed nearly 12% of the world's GDP. Its wealth and artistry unrivaled. A place whose looms shaped global fashion, whose craft defined an era. This was Bengal.
These traditions and practices have been traveling through time.
When I buy a sari, I try to see what history it has.
We can get a glimpse of the past.
It's for each one of us to understand that history is important. What is at the grassroots is important. What is past is very important.
Through this practice, the way they are experiencing time, we can also experience time backward.
The textiles of Bengal, which used to clothe the world at one point of time.
যখন আর্থিক অবস্থা খুব খারাপ ছিল তখন আমরা শিখেছি হাতের কাজ পাকা এটা সেটা করতাম, সেগুলো তো এখন আর হচ্ছে না।
এই দুর্দিনের জন্যই আমরা টাঙ্গাইল শাড়িতে শিল্পীগুলো এটা সব অন্য রাস্তায় চলে যাচ্ছে।
দুর্ভাগ্য আমাদের, এটা নিয়ে সরকার কিন্তু কোনো মাথা ঘামালো না।
সময় ছিল, সুযোগ ছিল, শুধু একটু শুভ ইচ্ছের দরকার ছিল।
তারা এক কথা বলে গেল, মডার্ন টেকনোলজি তোমাদের নিতে হবে, এটাকে অস্বীকার করলে হবে না।
It's one of the worst things that had happened to India. Absolutely.
পাওয়ার লুমকে তোমাদের অ্যাডাপ্ট করতে হবে, নাহলে মরো তোমরা।
যেটা হচ্ছে সেটা হচ্ছে শিল্পটার সর্বনাশ হচ্ছে।
So what really happened to all of this? Why are we in this state currently? Why is Bengal? Either way, it's whether it's West Bengal we're talking about or Bangladesh we are talking about, why are we in the state that we are? Even go back to all that happened, the changes that came about, what really impacted all of this? Whether it was the Indigo Mutiny, or it was the Bengal famine, or it was the migration, or it was the Swadeshi movement, or it was all these people who came in, the Portuguese came, then the Danish and Dutch came, powers that came in, the influences that happened. And what really happened in this entire geographical change, this political change, cultural, this socio-economic change, that impacted the textiles of Bengal.
In the 17th century, the English East India Company first set foot in Bengal as mere traders drawn by its promise of wealth. Their arrival was not political, only commercial. But as they discovered the unmatched artistry and resources of Bengal, their ambitions deepened. Slowly, trade turned to control.
The world came to us because we were prolific, open to trade, and wanted to make things happen.
When European companies were doing trade in India and they discovered this enormous and very rich textile tradition based on cotton, took those goods back to Europe. Indian textiles demonstrated the varieties of cotton wear that you can produce and the varieties of colors that you can apply on them. So that was a very impressive change for not just Europe, but the entire world, I mean, when it discovered Indian cotton.
So 17th, 18th century, you had these huge movements and migrations of people from rural parts of Europe to the cities. What happens in that context is that fashion becomes a very important aspect.
যখন পর্তুগিজরা আসলো বাংলাতে তখন ওরা কিন্তু কাঁথা অর্ডার করতো এবং এগুলো ওরা পাঠাতো তাদের নিজের দেশে।
The Indo-Portuguese embroideries, generically called the Sadgaon quills, that were exported to Portugal. Textiles from the west part of Bengal share this kind of identity with the rest of the Indian subcontinent through floral or vegetable or animal motifs.
How did we get Jamdani workers in Kalna and other places at the border areas? So how did Nakshi Katha come into a repertoire into the Bengal Katha, which was all very simple, much simpler and folk, and the Katha on the other side, which happens to be now the other side, but earlier it was all one. How that had an influence?
বাংলাদেশে বিভিন্ন রকমের নকশি কাঁথা আছে। জামালপুর তো একটা হয়ে গেছে, কিন্তু জামালপুরের কাঁথা একটু অন্যরকম। চাঁপাইনবাবগঞ্জে 3 রকমের কাঁথা, ফরিদপুরে আগে একরকম কাঁথা হতো, যশোরে একরকম কাঁথা হতো, শান্তিনিকেতনের একরকম কাঁথা হয়, কিন্তু এই সবগুলোকে আমরা বলি কাঁথা।
The kind of figuration, depiction of rural landscapes, everyday objects, people that you might find, say, in Punjab in the Bagh or the Pulkari. And then you have these absolutely distinct, repertoires of design and motives and patterns, like, say, the human figures in the Baluchari, which you don't find anywhere else really in the same way.
From Southeast Asia to Europe, many parts of Europe in major museums. The Victoria and Albert Museum has a substantial collection of muslin goods from India. That's Bengal. Muslins are primarily a Bengal product, at least the ones that became global.
The sheer fineness of the fabric, the sheer transparency of them, the whiteness and the shades of whiteness. If the Inuits had so many names for white.
আমাদের একটা জিনিস বুঝতে হবে যে জামদানি কিন্তু কোনো ডবি বা জ্যাকার্ড এই ধরনের কোনো রকম কৌশলগত তাঁত নয়। এটা সিম্পলি 2 ঝাপের একটা তাঁত, এক সুতা, এক অল্টারনেটিভ সুতা একটা ঝাপের কারণে উঠে প্যাডেল পায়ে থাকে, আবার প্যাডেল চেঞ্জ করলে, বাম পা ডান পা চেঞ্জ করলে তখন আরেকটা সুতা নামে, আর ভিতর দিয়ে সুতা হাত দিয়ে মাকু চালাতে হয়।
Jamdani is so distinguished, so you don't need to wear Benarasi. If you wear a Jamdani in a wedding, everybody will look at you.
So, you can think of several other products which are like these and used for very special occasions, but they are worn by people who are noticed in public. And that sets an interest in them, creates an interest in them, which is the first step to becoming a fashion trend.
Dyes, textiles can be so powerful in a way that it can move a community, it can move a country, it creates the entire geopolitics of this entire world.
In 1757 came a defining moment, the Battle of Plassey. The last Nawab of Bengal was defeated by Robert Clive of the East India Company. This single battle shifted the course of history, giving the British political control over Bengal.
In the beginning, it was okay. It used to come as a body and used to buy. When they started settling all these factors in different places, that's when the torture and all that began. Especially the Gomustans and Tikadars. And the weavers, they were called Boka. Why? Because they were very simple people. They could weave such marvel, and the salary was so low, but they didn't mind.
What they went through as a community, the hurt and the pain the marks were so deep that they never spoke about it.
Where India is located is a major producer of dyeing material. So the color use tradition is extremely well developed here. There are lots of dye agents that you find in this part of the world, not elsewhere. These added up, and India was a very significant user and producer of color.
Like, say for instance, the indigo color, which was so popular in the world at some point. It was used almost like an exchange, like gold. So it was called blue gold. It really changed the whole politics of the entire world, because people wanted to have control on the indigo, and that's why the Bengal indigo revolt happened. It was an unarmed movement where they protested against the British, and although they were mercilessly killed and they were tortured, but still they didn't plant a seed of indigo after that.
It was the spiritual and philosophical need to bring in things which can have different possibilities. And I picked natural dye, just not because it's natural dye. I picked natural dye because I wanted to use indigo, talk about it because it's one of the oldest dye we have used, human being. And it creates so much variations. And indigo is something which you cannot control mechanically. No? You have to use your senses to dye. You have to use your eyes, your smell. You have to hear indigo. You have to taste it. And these senses are something which is endangered.
In the 18th century, whether in Europe it was mainly handmade cloth tradition, or whether it's in India. But in the late 18th century, Britain was already experimenting with different types of looms. Some of them are much faster looms, some of them are spinning machines which are much faster, which could produce a range of yarn or hanks of yarn at the same time. So these were more automatic, much speedier machines, and then eventually they were used by water power or mechanical power, steam power. The ability to mix different types of fibers, different qualities of cotton in the mill, in the factory. Once that started, then the ability to use cotton from different parts of the world increased enormously. However, in the 19th century that we are talking about, power looms were a very limited instrument. They could produce very plain cloth very fast, much faster than handmade cloth, but not much more. Now, people were not just buying plain white cloth and wearing them. When British textiles first came in, it was a huge shock for domestic producers. The newspaper letter from, I think, 1820s, a letter written on behalf of a woman who was a widow, a Bengali woman, who is saying that when my husband died and I was quite young with children, I had no other livelihood. I'm from a family where women don't normally work. And I was advised by neighbors and well-wishers that you can take up spinning because many other women were doing it, and we will come and buy your product.
And she started spinning. And it was so wide, 500, 600, and all there. And the weavers used to come, buy. She didn't have to go to the market. They came and they bought from her. One day it stopped. She wondered what happened. She went to the market. Then she saw
that the English yarn had come into the market. They were cheaper, they were finer. Weavers wanted that product, so they were not coming to her anymore. And then she ends this, sad story or lament, if you like, with the message that if I am worse off, how much more worse off will be the English spinners, the women, my counterparts in England, who are suffering probably much more than I am.
And letter is still kept in the government office. The Dukkini, poor thing. So it all stopped when the Manchester Yard came. That was very sad, very sad.
So that's a very interesting history. It kind of connects the past with the present very readily.
And not only that, they used to get the designs of the border, these colonial people, done by our weavers, and they used to learn the technique, and then they were producing the same borders in the mill and sending it here. So this is the way they ruined our textile trade.
When I work with the weavers, I get inspired by the skill they know, which has been inherited by them from their forefathers, by the history like indigo, and by the weave that like there's a community over here which were part of the Gandhiji Satyagraha movement, where they would weave, we call in Bengali the mota kapur, means thick cloth, because at that time when Gandhiji called for Satyagraha movement and boycotted all foreign goods, the weavers would spin and weave their own fabric, and that became the symbolic the symbol of the freedom struggle, the khadi, the khaddar.
But the other bigger impact was creating an interest in indigenous tradition. Not exactly a political or economic policy type of impact, but a large number of people became interested in knowing how ordinary artisans, peasants lived, how they worked, what they did, what they earned, what they consumed. And as part of that, quite a lot of studies were done of handloom weavers, more probably in Bengal than elsewhere. That's a kind of spin-off, if you like, from Swadeshi.
So I'm very proud about this Swadeshi movement. But what happened at that time, you see the saris which were woven with mill, because the mills were, it was a mill, and not only that, the yarn came from Manchester, which affected the weavers also. Over the centuries, it went on, and fantastic things were woven at that time in Shantipur. Even saris, one side gold, one side silver. That kind of saris used to be. They didn't need any cotton or silk yarn. With golden thread, and they're called Kalavati saris. They were so beautiful, but they all went abroad. Everything went abroad. How they have exploited us.
In the 1930s was quite significant, and many literary works have been written around it, including this classic novel by Tagore, Ghare Baire, which is a movement to boycott foreign textiles. That was quite extensive, and it was again an extremely powerful moment for Bengal, because it happened in a very big way in Bengal.
At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
1947, the moment of freedom, but with a wound that would never heal. The Ratcliffe Line cut through Bengal like a blade, dividing land, families, and traditions overnight. What was once a shared fabric of culture and craft was torn apart into two nations, India and East Pakistan. Weavers fled homes, artisans struggled to stitch life back together. The price of independence was a partition that left threads scattered, yet still holding on to memories of a united past.
What has not been documented, it's time to document. Migration and back migration stories. There are a couple of people now alive, because we had migration in 71 and before that in 47. And how these people were affected, what happened really, how the skills got transferred.
আমার টাঙ্গাইল জেলাটা এখন টাঙ্গাইলের পাশে আশোকপুর গ্রাম, পিসি সরকারের বাড়ি ছিল, তার পাশে আমার বাড়ি ছিল। যখন সকালে উঠি বাবা দেখি কান্না করছে, তখন আমার 9 বছর পরে দেখে ওই বাড়ির লোক ঘর আছে, লোক নেই, একটা লোকও নেই, মানে সব ইন্ডিয়া চলে এসেছে। পরের দিন দেখছে আর দুবারই নেই। তারপর দেখছে প্রায় এরকম করে গ্রামটা ফাঁকা হয়ে গেল। তখন বাবা দেখলো যে এই বাচ্চা নিয়ে আমি কি করে থাকবো, তখনও বাবা এই দেশ আসার জন্য পাড়ি দিল।
আমাদের যখন বলছি যে স্বর্ণযুগ, তখন ফুলিয়াতে প্রায় 60-65 হাজার মতো তাঁত চলতো। এখন সম্ভবত 5%ও চলে না।
The change of ownership of one of the most populated and poorest parts of the world is now being confirmed.
1971, the wound reopens. East Pakistan becomes Bangladesh. Borders harden, and with them, lives and livelihoods are torn apart once more. For artisans, it was another exile, another scattering of threads across an unforgiving map. This time, the divide is deeper, leaving wounds that history still struggles to heal.
My entire point is that we need to think beyond borders. Because what has happened is that every person there who's got affected has a backstory to tell. Are we really listening to that story?
তখন উদ্বাস্তু ওপার বাংলা থেকে আসছে, সবসময় এসে রিফিউজি ক্যাম্পে বা নিজেদেরই কোনো আত্মীয় স্বজনের কাছে গিয়ে আশ্রয় নিচ্ছে। তো ওই কলোনি যখন তৈরি হচ্ছে, কিছু ঘর তৈরি হচ্ছে, কিছু অর্ধসমাপ্ত হচ্ছে, তখন অন্য পেশার উদ্বাস্তু হিসাবে যারা আসছে তারা ওই সমস্ত ঘর দখল করে নিচ্ছে।
আলমে আমার এই সুতোই করেছে, সুতো না, সেটা হচ্ছে কি আমাদের একদম তুলোর থেকে সুতো, আর ওদের যে সুতোটা তৈরি হচ্ছে হাফ পলিস্টার আর হাফ তুলো দিয়ে তৈরি করা, ওটা পাড়ি করতে হয় না, হ্যাঁ ওটা ঢোপ করে কোম্পানি থেকে বেরিয়ে আসতো, ওই মালদের তৈরি করতে।
তখন আস্তে আস্তে হ্যান্ডলুম পিছিয়ে যেতে লাগলো, আর পাওয়ারলুম বেশ কিছু তাঁতিকে মহাজনরা টেনে নিল পাওয়ারলুমের অপারেটর হিসাবে, আর কিছু তাঁতি অন্য পেশার দিকে ঢুকে গেল।
কেউ হয়তো টুকটুকি কিনে নিয়েছে, কেউ হয়তো অন্য রাজ্যে দিয়ে অন্য কোনো কাজ করছে, নানান ধরনের নানান পেশা ধরার চেষ্টা করছে।
Every day, if they can work, they earn. The day they don't work, they don't earn. It is very, very simple. So they want to earn on a regular basis. So they need work throughout the year.
When the price was going up, but yet we are not getting anything. We were not getting it. Closed, stopped.
খুব দুঃখের গল্প আমাদের, আজকে আমরা এই পারে এসে নিঃস্ব। সরকার আমাদেরকে সিটিজেন দিয়েছে, কিন্তু সেভাবে সিটিজেন দেয়নি, ওই কাগজটাই পাওয়া গেছে।
আমাদের তাঁতিদেরকে যেমন শিল্পী বলা হতো, আর তাদের হাতের কাজটাই ছিল আসল। হাতের গুণে শাড়ির জেদলা বাড়ত, শাড়ির কদর বাড়ত, গ্রাহকদের কাছে প্রিয় হতো।
To really understand that it's hands that really matter. Otherwise, everything is by hand, whether it's dyeing the yarn, dyeing the fabrics, hand block printing, steaming, processing, making the dyes, mixing them, to tie and dyes, to weaving, to hand painting, to tailoring, everything is by hand. So the whole thing came, the mission statement came from that use as many hands as possible.
আর এই হাতের স্পর্শ ছাড়া এখন যে তাঁতি যারা আছে তাদেরকে তাঁতিও বলা যাবে না, তাদেরকে আমরা বলি সুইচ অপারেটর।
আমি বিশ্বাস করি না, শাড়ি হয় না ওটা। আমার বাবা বলতো কাপড় আর চোপড়, আমার কাছে ওটা চোপড় মনে হচ্ছে এখন।
আজকে আমি এই 65 বছরে দাঁড়িয়ে আমাদের এই কাজ যে শিখতে আসবে এরকম আগ্রহ আর কেউ করেনি, আগে অনেক ছেলে এসছে কাজ শিখতে।
And that also brings us to a point about terminologies. the local terminologies are disappearing because everything is being written in English. That is good, not at the expense of the traditional terms. Uski upeksha nahi honi chahiye na, because uske saath a lot of subtleties are lost also of the materials, of the traditional systems of doing things. It's the vernacular that needs a resurgence at the same time.
Bismillah Dhanashwari, Ostader Charan Dhari, Je Kam Dhari, She Kam Shikha Kori, Ma Lokki Garayan, Alokki Dur Kor, Bismillah নাম লয়ে কাম শুরু কর।
এখন এই যে শ্লোকটা, এটার বয়স কিন্তু 100-200 বৎসর। এখনকার সময়ে যদি আমরা জামদানি গ্রামে যাই, তারা তাহলে কিভাবে বিষয়টাকে দেখে, এখানে কিছু কিছু শব্দের পরিবর্তন দেখা যায়।
ওমান বোন, হইরে বারে, পেছে বারে, ঘাটে বারে, ঘাটাইল খেও, উদে ঘাটে, পেছে বারে, ঘাটে বারে।
পুরো গণনাটার মধ্যে একটা সাংকেতিক শব্দ বসিয়ে দেয় এবং সেই সাংকেতিক শব্দগুলোর ওদের মতো করে একটা প্যাটার্ন ম্যানারিজম আছে। পৃথিবীতে খুব কম বয়নশিল্প আছে এই মানের, যেখানে এই ধরনের বুলি শ্রুতির মাধ্যমে মেমোরাইজড হয় এবং নকশাগুলি তৈরি হতে থাকে।
It's very important to continue this legacy. It's very important to make sure that as many hands as possible are used. That can only happen with handcrafting, and that can only happen in a country like India, which has such great handcrafting and such great numbers that wherever the world is looking today, it's looking towards India, because we still have it. We have the skill, we have the craftsmanship, we have the dedication, we have the knowledge, we have the family to like 4th, 5th, 6th generation of children joining the business. We have new people joining the business. We have people who want to slow down their lives, who want to learn weaving, who want to sit and embroider. It's worth it because number one, it keeps our legacy going, our textile legacy, our textile techniques, our textile history, our textile iconography, the fantastic masterpieces, whether you saw them in the museums or at the Festival of India's or at private collections or wherever you saw such pieces in exhibitions and specially curated collections and specially made. So we have so many hands in India. Besides farming, the second largest industry is textile. So I believe that if we continue to work at this and build the awareness and make people understand that it's no longer just a craft, and it's actually luxury to be able to have a textile like this on your body. You know, it breathes, it helps you be closest to the environment. It does everything that you otherwise want to do, and it does it for you naturally. So why are you veering away? Why are you not invested in it? And unless you are invested in it, you can't spread that awareness.
A person's character blends in and gives him or her more confidence. To give the power. This is exactly clothes does to us, right? It's more like an armor to us.
It's subtle. At the same time, it's sexy. You need to be sexy.
Right after we are born, the very connection which we get is with the piece of cloth. You are being washed, cleaned, processed, and wrapped. And this is a bond which exists until we die.
We have a heritage, we have a very, very wonderful weaving heritage, but yes, it is there, but in that whole thing, we ignore what is happening today.
To be brutal, I must say, before saving others, we have to save ourselves.
In India, you have every family probably has somebody who's either knitting or embroidering or weaving or doing something to do with textile. Everybody in some way is in that ecosystem where this is a part of what they are, and this is all that they know. They are not exposed to anything else.
আমরা এই টাঙ্গাইল শাড়ি ছাড়া অন্য কাজ শিখিনি, অন্য কোনো কাজই করতে পারবো না, কিন্তু শাড়িটা কত ভালো করতে হয় সেটা আমি করতে পারবো।
আমি তো যতদিন পারবো, যতক্ষণ পারবো চালিয়ে যাবো।
এই ছোট 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 জিনিস নিয়ে আমরা বেঁচে থাকি, ছোট ছোট জীবন যুদ্ধ, ছোট ছোট ঘটনা, এগুলোই আমাদের নাড়িয়ে দেয়। কিন্তু তার মধ্যেও এই মেয়েদের মধ্যে যে একটা শিল্প চেতনা গড়া গেছে এবং তারা এই কাজটা নিয়ে খুব প্রাউড।
I think the future is definitely strong, but what we are going through right now is that we are losing a lot of skills because if one generation doesn't learn the trade from their forefathers, because we don't teach it in our school and we don't teach it professionally, the skills die.
It's just too rich a tradition to vanish. It's going to survive and continue in a different way.
That what is from the past currently even exists in a contemporary format, and that doesn't exist only for textile as in wearable textile. It exists so that we can take it out from beyond wearable textile to architecture, to interior design, to films and costume, to artists and collaborations, to art textiles, to a much wider space and with a much wider collaboration and a much wider opportunities.
Because of the depth of our continuum, our human continuum, we have at the back of our minds our stories still, even though we might feel that in the modern context these things are being lost. But these stories come back. And what is an art object without the stories? And in a civilization like our Eastern cultures especially, in all world cultures, unless you have the stories and the intangibles with it, usme ras nahi hota hai. So these two things have to be protected together, and this is happening in a big way across the country.
Choices people have now are many more, are much more.
We also have this very amazing knack for actually taking things, making them really relevant, successful. That's really in our DNA, we're a trading subcontinent.
All the top designers from all over the world, especially Italian and the European designers, the French and the American designers, are all coming to India to get their handwork done because we have the skill. We have the skill set at a price which is affordable. So that's the magic of India, is that the numbers.
Ultimately, we have to change, and in order to sustain this earth, in order to sustain the livelihood, handlooms, handmade, natural dyes, this is the solution.
This integrity we want to carry forward. We don't want to spoil it.
And it's a very important value. It's about sincerity, it's about honesty with your work. And these are timeless values that are woven in the fabric of human beings around the world and civilizations.
জামদানিতে সিঙ্গারা নকশা এবং